What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Grit, and I'm super excited for this episode. So I've got to know our guest today over the last couple months as her and her dad, Shane. So Melissa and Shane Merem have had their own podcast called The Melly Show. And, you know, what started off as a podcast for a daughter and a father to really, instead of getting lunch, they came in and decided to have their conversations in the studio. And I've got to really listen, be pulled in to this incredible stories. And you all know how I'm fascinated with like the human psychology and how we become who we become. And sitting down and listening to Melissa ask questions of her dad, Shane, and like really going through his story, it's been really cool. But then something really freaking cool happened. Melissa started like being more vocal. Her voice started coming out. And I'm like, wow, this is a whole difference maker. This is a whole platform. There's been several times that she's been speaking. I've got the goosebumps, and that now she has her own platform that actually she's had for a little bit. And so I'm super excited to have her on the show to dive into this. And you know what? This has been my vision for this content studio or for what I've been doing over the last several years. And I look at this as like the Motown records for difference making voices and difference making entrepreneurs to be able to come together, to be able to have a platform, to be able to speak your mind, to get your difference making voice out there, change the world, make a bigger difference, make a bigger impact in the world. But then in the meantime, you're working with other people that's like that iron sharpens iron. You get to do the collaborations and like stuff like this where you get to like sit down and have a really cool conversation. So Melissa, enough of my babbling. Welcome to the studio again that you're really familiar to. But
Thank you so
you're
much
not
for
used to
having
being in
me.
this seat though.
Yes, it's actually, I feel like I'm kind of in the hot seat. I get like how my dad felt on our first episode. He's like, okay, like what is Melissa going to say? What is she going to do? So yeah.
It's fun because I love having people that have never done a podcast before. They're so nervous and they're like have no idea what they're gonna say, and we'll sit and have like this hour conversation, and I have to cut them off like to end the conversation. They're like, "What has that been like 20 minutes?" I'm like, "No, man, it's been an hour, or an hour 30 minutes or whatever." So
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to get into. I actually have no idea what I'm going to say, but I know that I always trust the process, and we're just here to make a difference. So.
well, and so I want to talk like one. Let's start talking about you've had the Melly Show and the podcast with your dad, but then that really cool. I talk about episode 8 and how you just like unleashed it, and I was like, whoa! And not that you weren't good before, but you like stepped into like really. Like I look at that, I say, hell is meeting the person that you could have been. You stepped into where you're going, right? And then you said a couple things, and I was like, wow, those are like platforms. And then it turns out you've had this name for this platform on social media for like a couple years. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So, I guess I don't really know where to start, but my whole life I've always just felt like a calling to help people, and I just never really understood in what way or form that would look. Like I had no idea. I just trusted that one day I'm going to help a lot of people, and so I'm constantly finding ways, just in like little areas of life, to just be an example. Because the first thing is like if I don't practice what I preach, then there's no sense in actually preaching it to begin with. So not that I'm perfect. I would never claim to be a perfect person, but I just kind of always set up myself in a way where if I'm going to start talking about things, I have to be setting up the processes and the systems in my daily life so that it becomes like a habit. And then I ended up stumbling on a lot of books and a lot of different things that have just helped me along the way. I've been in and out of a lot of jobs where I had the chance and ability to help people, but then eventually just didn't really serve where I was at. And I learned the hard way. So I have to be told very brutally, like by whoever that person is, like, this is not for you anymore. And, that might look like getting fired, or in other ways where I worked for family, just trying different areas and learned something really great. And then I'm like, okay, like I think I'm ready to move on to something else. But the mindset of like my podcast with Women Create Armies is I want to be the difference that I want to see in the world. And then also be like, if I don't take care of myself, not in a selfish way, but if I don't fuel my body right, if I don't take care of myself, I can't help anyone else. So over the last few years, like really when I was in high school, I noticed like mentally I was just really depressed and anxious, and so was everyone. Like, who am I to be so special, and who am I to say my life is worse than anyone? It's not. I've always been very blessed with my family and the people around me, and somehow I noticed myself falling into like depression and anxiety, and then I was just giving it way too much like rent-free space in my head, and I noticed that, and I'm like, no one's gonna save me. Like everyone else is so stuck in their own heads, they're no one's coming to save me, you know. But so I just kind of started listening to videos and seeking answers. And where I made a misstep is not reading the Bible and seeking the answers in the Bible. So the path I'm on, I think I've always found like, yeah, I've always kind of evolved my thoughts and feelings, and it's, hey, this just feels better than that, or I feel like that's off, you know. And so lately, over the last few weeks, I've realized like I've been fighting God. But I was raised Catholic. You know, in high school, I was at a Catholic high school. It wasn't like I didn't have the people and the resources and the community around me, but I fought it because I thought I was so worried about what other people thought. But also, I would tell you, I don't care what people think, and I really don't. But we still, if you're not choosing to actually not care what people think in every moment, by not choosing, you're still choosing to care. And so that's also something that I've kind of like realized lately by
Not
not
choosing is a choice.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I did create the Women Create Armies podcast or like Instagram page. That was what I created in October of 2023. That was in between a job before the one I have now that did not end very well. And I don't think it's actually any fault of the person that I was with. However, I've always held a lot of resentment towards that, but really at myself for not noticing the signs that it wasn't for me. I resented myself for not being more honest with myself and the people around me that like that wasn't really going to work out. And I did know, but
We sometimes lie to ourselves.
yes, all the time. I actually like, yeah, that's another thing that really over the last few weeks I've kind of just known, you know, like you kind of know these things and you're like, oh, well, you know, it doesn't apply to everything. And it's like, it totally does. It applies to everything.
It doesn't. It's so funny. Yeah, it applies across all the levels. And you talk about even like the Bible, for example, and like we've talked about like getting into it for even on my end more and like exploring religion, realizing that there's so many success principles. And like if you live your life in a certain way, you'll have success.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've been learning so much more about like you can be successful in this world without God, but then what's the point? Like you see it happen all the time. People in Hollywood, they have all this money, but then, you know,
What are they?
we've
They're filling it.
yeah, absolutely. And like really what is success? I think that mindset or the thought of what really success is very skewed in our world because it's based on worldly things. And then like I've seen you and like we had Kevin on our Melly Show podcast and he talks about how like his success is freedom and he's you would assume he has all the money in the world and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But at the end of the day, if he lost everything but he still had his freedom, that's still success. But our world constantly is pushing like, no, you, especially as women, you have to go to college to get a 4-year degree to go make $50,000 and be $100,000 in debt. And the success is that now you have a career and now you've placed all of the worldly pressures over and above what God actually called us to do, which is to create a community, be a good person, have children. I actually I've never heard this phrase from anyone else, but I have this mindset that I want a lot of kids. Now, I believe in God's plan. If it doesn't come to happen, there's so many kids who need a family out there, and I fully intend to be able to help to my fullest ability. So what does that look like? Well, I have this math equation in my head for how many kids I actually want. You can't have an only kid because an only kid, unless there's lots of cousins around, which nothing against only kids, but you kind of need to be bullied a little bit as a kid so that you understand like what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think bullying is necessarily wrong unless it's rooted in like just being a terrible mean person. But sometimes I can seem like a bully when I tell someone like, hey, I see the path you're on and it's not going to lead you anywhere good. That, you know,
Yep.
so iron sharpens iron. But you can't just have one kid, and then you can't just have two because you're barely replacing you and your husband. So if you can't have just two, well, you can't have three. I'm one of three. I was always the odd one out, and like, okay, whatever. But I hate odd numbers. I prefer an even number, anyways. So then 4, right? But then if you're gonna have 4 kids, if you
You
do
might as
the
well have
research,
5.
yeah, if you do the research, they say that any amount of kids after 3 really doesn't feel any different. So then it's like, okay, why wouldn't you just have 6? And now you've just created 6 wonderful people. And my mom was one of 6, and we have a huge family, and I love it. And then something that I hear a lot from young women is how like they don't always say like they're hopeless, but they just have very hopeless thoughts. Like, well, I can't really do anything about my circumstance, so why would I even try? Or why would I have kids? This world sucks. Well, be the change you want to see in the world, and if you can't beat them, outbreed them. Now, I brought that up without all like that. I mean, that's literally the step by step that I'll take people when I tell them why I want to have so many kids. Can't beat them, outbreed them.
Yep.
It's not hopeless if you take into your own hands your own what God called us women to do. Not that every woman is going to have a kid or that you're a failure as a woman if you don't, because again, that's what our world tells us. What is success? Being the change you want to see in the world, you reap what you sow. Like, again, it all comes back to the Bible, and that's what I fought for so long. It's like I had these thoughts and feelings, and now I've started asking people, I'm like, what is that based on? And then they don't really have an answer. And I was like, if you're not choosing to base it on the Bible, your not choice is still a choice. And that's, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. If you're not constantly thinking about God, which I never understood what that meant. I went through Catholic school for my entire life. The only year that I didn't go was my senior year, and I didn't go to college. However, I did some college while in high school and a little bit afterwards, but I went to a community college, and it was mostly online because I was working full time.
Yeah.
And I actually did it for the tax credits and because my mom was telling me that I could be a doctor, and I do definitely feel called to the health field in general, but I don't believe that the colleges have health right at all. And that's a hot take.
Well, even Western medicine has it all
Yeah.
figured out because it's really, there's a lot of money grab into it.
Yeah.
It's not really designed to help people or cure people from diseases.
No, it's not. And not as specifically, like I definitely think that there's a place for our doctors, but a lot of people are going to doctors for answers for chronic diseases, and no one actually really understands what a chronic disease is. So if you don't, nobody tries to solve a problem without researching the problem first. That's just common sense. So why are we going to doctors who actually haven't done any of the research? Not all of them. Some of them are actually understanding that what they've been taught is not to help any kind of chronic problems. And that's another way that our world is hopeless. Like, you hear about this specific thing that you're having a problem with and how there is no answer for where it comes from, but it's just inflammation. Okay, well, what is inflammation? Like start researching this yourself. Your doctors can give you a pill to reduce inflammation, but that is just a Band-Aid on a fire hose, and you're pushing down the effects to, longer and longer in your life, or the cost. It can be very expensive to pay attention and do the things to get yourself chronically healthy on a daily basis. But once you do it, the long-term benefits far outweigh the initial cost, because what is life if you're working a 9 to 5 after being massively in debt through college to not actually have ever been, or tried the field that you're going into? Maybe you hate it and it causes you so much stress, and then you're stressed and now you're retired and you have all this money to spend, but you don't have health. That's what I'm in that kind of a field where I see it all the time. These people are horribly sick and they're finally retired and have so much money because they did all the right things, but no one told them, hey, you have to take care of your body on the way. And none of our institutions are set up to allow you to take care of yourself. None of them. Schools, are you kidding me? They're set up to put kids in, it's basically like taking a monkey, trapping him in a cage, and then saying, why'd you bite me when I tried to feed you?
Yeah. And, education can work. The education system works for some people.
Yeah.
But there's so many people that are outside of that box. And I guess, what I love about your conversations is it pushes that construct of the lies that we have been told. Mm-hmm. In good examples, we're talking about medicine and stuff like that. I had a guy on my podcast a few months ago named Pete Lopez, and Pete does he has a physical therapy business, and he does physical therapy and personal training and that kind of stuff. And what started him in his business is when he was in his early 20s, he got a back injury. He was doing hard labor and he got a back injury, and the doctors told him, "Yep, you gotta have surgery. We're gonna have to fuse those vertebrae together, and you're never going to be able to run and do the things that you love to do anymore.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, take all this pain medication and, dull your pain. And so Pete was on this medication, and one pill leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another, because like the side effects of all those medications, lead to depression, lead to weight gain. And then it's like you're going through all this stuff. You're being told you can't run anymore. You're going to have to go through this surgery. It's going to debilitate you. All of a sudden, you're gaining weight. And a side effect of depression, that's going to increase your depression because now you're losing everything, right?
Yeah.
And so he's going through this process. In the meantime, he started doing a lot of research, and he realized, I am not going to do this. I'm going to get off all the medication. I'm going to wean myself off. I'm going to find natural ways to take care of myself. He started really like becoming a student of his own body, became like diving in. He like went like really took it to another level and like learned. He ended up cutting himself out of all his medications.
Wow.
Lost the weight, healed himself from the pain, didn't have to have the surgery. When he went back to his doctor and told the doctor like how he got off all the medications and how he's feeling great and all this stuff, he thought he was going to get that a boy. Oh my God, you're amazing. Instead, the doctor chastised him.
Yeah.
The doctor told him he was stupid. The doctor told him, what are you doing? You don't do this without consulting me first.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided that day that this whole medical system is just fucked up. That like,
Yeah.
this is the way that they're leading you in order to get money, and they're not looking for a long-term solution. They're not diving beyond the surface. This is a construct and a lie that we've been told. And then you look at different things like chiropractors or Reiki, or just different things that are like more spiritual or more woo-woo, and doctors and medication talk about those things like they're woo-woo and you'd be stupid to do those things. It's just all a sale.
Sorry that they're not funded as much as you and your education were. All the colleges, if you actually do the research, there's this book that I really like. It's called Natural Cures That They Don't Want You to Know. And it talks about who the they actually are and how lobbyists are basically funded to push stuff. Like, okay, so there's so much to this. Like, this could be a whole episode in and of itself.
Yep.
But why on earth do we have like actual medication ads for things that like may or may not actually apply to you with all these side effects on the TV? Like that's really fucked up if you think about it.
It's
like,
really fucked up.
why?
But I wish that the commercials would have to portray when they're doing the side effects, because they're always like people like running, or they're like canoeing, they're climbing mountains. People are living this great life, and they're like talking about this and then at the very end they do all these side effects. I wish the person was sitting in the canoe and all of a sudden they started hemorrhaging out their ears. I wish they were sitting in the canoe and they started having massive diarrhea, or like thoughts of depression or suicide, or like these different things that are happening because of this medication they're taking. Instead of just reading off the symptoms that they were going through it in the meantime, it'd be so funny.
We're just lied to all the time.
All the time.
All the time. And so the doctors, like, I don't think that doctors are inherently mean or bad people, but they don't sometimes, like, I mean, I've gone to many doctors and they don't really tell me or give me answers to my chronic problems, and we all have them. I don't have to have an autoimmune disease to have a chronic problem. And I've always thought I was really healthy but I was also really skinny my whole life, and that may or may not have been super healthy, but I don't really know. My doctors couldn't help me at all.
Yep.
I had lymph node problems, but I knew nothing about the lymph system. So that's something I've been learning a lot about and making myself feel. And like, then I hear these horror stories, and it's, how do I say this without like, okay, actually it doesn't matter. So
say it.
Like during World War II, there were a lot of Nazis who were doing a lot of, supposedly, I wasn't there, but a lot of Nazis who were doing surgeries on like, conjoined twins, really a lot of like even gender changing surgeries, things that like are humanitarian problems. And so those Nazi doctors, they did not get killed when the war was over. Nobody actually really chastised them. It was actually a race for a lot of the countries to get those people, because the kind of science they were doing, technically, like really no one would actually support, but they already were doing it. So they brought them in, and some of our actual health practices nowadays is based on those very like not what's like ethical. There was no science behind it. They were just investigating and trying something new. And sure, like, okay. But then I hear this story, like my dad, I'm actually very upset about this, by the way. Last episode, we talked about how he had his tonsils and his lymph nodes removed. And his doctor had no reason as to why he had those lymph nodes and tonsils removed, except that they were swollen and causing him a problem. Well, that's a symptom of a root problem.
Yep.
That doctor did not solve it. And for anyone who knows my dad, he has dystonia and a lot of health problems right now where he literally, if he stops moving at any point, he will become frozen in a wheelchair until he decides that he can move again. And he can. He can. People have fully recovered from dystonia, but then there actually is no reason for why it's a thing. It's just a neurological problem, which could be from PTSD. It could be from all these things, stress, chronic stress, which if you know my dad, he's a stress ball. But that doctor didn't actually help him. He hurt my dad way more in the process because he didn't take the time to actually remove, like to figure out why his lymph nodes were inflamed. But that's what those Nazi doctors were doing. That's the kind of stuff they were doing during the war that everyone thought was a humanitarian problem. That was like, and now we're actually doing it to our own population. We're doing it to Americans all the time. I know several people, way more people than they'd actually like to admit, who have had actual organs removed because of a chronic autoimmune disease that doctors are not equipped to help get solved. That pisses me off. Because we're being lied to all the time. And so are our doctors.
Yep.
Everyone is being lied to. And no one is actually as upset as they should. Well, there's a lot of people who are very upset about it, but they're always pushed down in the algorithms. No one wants to hear from them because it's not easy to hear that you've been lied to every single day of your life. Every single day of your life.
Those people sound crazy, and it's very easy to make them look crazy because they're telling you this information, right? And it's one of those things of like, I believe, I talk about being a difference maker, and I don't think it's very hard to be a difference maker. When I got into sales when I was really young, I sucked at it. And then I, like, through a long story, through trials and like going out and seeing how people were and how people were serving people or selling to people, I realized it doesn't take much to be better than the average. You know, just sitting and getting to know, like if you're doing business with somebody, like getting to know them. What's your challenges? What's your problems? What's your goal? What do you want to achieve? Like what's holding you back? Like really getting to understand somebody versus giving them a one size fits all prescription. And when you talk about like having your lymph nodes and tonsils removed and like nobody like really diagnosing the true problem, this is my story. I was a victim. When I was young, I grew up with an abusive dad. I was like I was scared of my own shadow. I was scared of like the kids at school. In first grade on the playground, this kid told me there was this kid. He looked funny. He only had two fingers. Like he was like, he just looked bad, you know, like he like looked scary to me in my first grade mind.
Yeah.
And one of the kids on the playground told me that if he touched me or if he touched you, that you would look like him or that you would like. Wow. And in my first grade mind, like in my victim mentality, like I believed it. I believed it with everything in my body.
It's like the cheese touch.
It's like the cheese touch, right? Yeah, exactly. I didn't go out. I didn't want to go outside for recess because that's where he was. I like look back at my first grade year and like the fool that I made of myself by like, you know, crying and not wanting to go outside. There was like talks in my classroom. Like my teacher would have to have talks like to the whole classroom about like because of the situations that I was causing by not going out but I was making myself sick to my stomach every single day because I didn't want to go to school. My mom took me to the doctor because she couldn't figure out what was going on. And instead of like asking questions and understanding it's all in my head, I'm causing this in my mind.
Right.
There's nothing physically wrong with me. It's in my mind. Their solution was to remove my tonsils.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm completely serious. Yeah, completely serious. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's, yeah. I feel for your mom that she allowed that to happen because
you just don't know.
She knew any better.
She didn't know any better.
But no one's telling everyone that you're being lied to, and that's not an easy thing to hear. It's not an easy thing to hear or to actually understand because it like to actually take that into mind, you have to change the entire way that you think and everything that you're consuming. It's not an easy change. And I've been on this journey for a long time. And thankfully my mother like has been really good about like without her, I don't think I would be as far along in my journey because she did take care of us. And my brother was suggested to get his tonsils removed and she played with it, but I don't think I don't think he got his tonsils removed because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Like we actually stopped getting vaccinated at a young age because my mom was like, okay, so we're going to get like, oh, I forget exactly what it is. There's a lot of vaccines she said no to, but the one for ovarian cancer, she's like, okay, well, she's like a kid. So if she wants to get that when she's an adult, she can make that decision. She doesn't need that right now.
Yep.
My kid. And there's a lot of things that my mom put stops to just because like she just felt like it was wrong, and she may or may not have had the scientific research and the exact facts as to why it didn't make sense. But that was God telling her, like, I created all of you perfectly, and it doesn't mean we're not going to have problems with health. To be created perfectly by God doesn't mean that we're healthy all the time and that life is easy. He put us on this earth to go through a spiritual battle. And if you don't act, not you, but if like people aren't understanding that sometimes our health is its own spiritual battle in and of itself, you just haven't been told that yet. And it's not your fault, but it is your fault once you actually hear that, not to do more research. I don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
but you can find them yourself. And I'm on this journey to just bring this information to light. We should be able to ask questions to our doctors without feeling like I don't have a college education, which means I don't get to ask you this question.
5,000%.
Or I'm not a teacher, so I can't question why a teacher is teaching my kid something. It's my kid, not yours. We're not co-parenting. But that's the mindset of these schools. And I'm here to remind women that we have the ability to intuitively understand what is good for our kids and what's not. How often do you hear these stories that a doctor said something had to happen, but a mom is like, it just feels wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It just
Yep.
feels wrong. That is our intuition, and that is God talking to you and telling you that it is wrong. Listen to
Listen
your
to it.
body.
Yep.
Trust yourself. Don't trust these people who have a college education and tell you because you don't, you're not smart enough or good enough to be able to make these kind of decisions. Nobody knows your kids like you do. It's why we're here.
It's why we're here. And I've heard so many stories where somebody's listened to their intuition and not taken the advice of a doctor and went and got a second opinion and are so thankful, because if they would have went down that path, it would have been a totally different outcome than the good outcome that they got. And talking about this, I want to hit especially specifically for women, and I know I talked to you about one of the guests I had on here in the past, Christina Prushinsky, and how she is a therapist for specifically women that have autoimmune diseases, because she has autoimmune diseases, and she, through this experience of her life, when going to the doctors, they treat her because these are invisible, like the invisible diseases, and people treat her like she doesn't know what she's talking about, like she's complaining about, she has phantom complaints, like they can't see it, so they can't measure it, and so she must be making it up. And she's like talked about on the episode about her whole struggle through her life, where she has to bring her husband to her doctor appointments, because went through the process, like they'll ask her a question and look at her husband to verify whether she's telling the truth or whether she's a crazy lady. And so she knows, like, going through this, and like her specialty is working with women, because she knows that they're not only going through this debilitating pain and everything else that comes with whatever specific autoimmune diseases they have, but they're also being doubted by everybody because they're a woman. Because if you think about it, because if a man comes in and says, I'm having these issues, it's going to be dealt differently.
Nobody questions it, Nobody questions it because, like, right, we're so in our feelings, and you guys are so logical, and those should not be negative thought. Those should not be negative things, but it's used against us in many ways. Our whole world tells us that women shouldn't be so emotional and men should have more feelings, and women should be more logical and men should just continue to be logical because they're always right about it, and it's just not true. But then you wonder why you're fighting with your husband, and for every piece of information that you're listening to the people around you, you have no idea where it's coming from or what they're basing it off of. So how do you base that relationship? What do you base it on? The Bible. It's all in there, but they don't want you to know. It's why, like, the war on Christianity is there, because it's just constantly pointing out, like, Christianity itself, like, is so, it's very controversial because it is the truth, and it's really hard to refute, but people, man, they try so hard to. They try so hard, and it's not that we shouldn't question everything. We should question everything, but eventually we should settle on, hey, we're not, there is a lot of unknowns around the Bible, and that's okay. We're not omniscient. We don't know everything all the time. And to assume that somebody who's a specialist in a field knows everything all the time is wrong. It's wrong.
And if they tell you they know everything all the time, like, you don't want to listen to anybody that says I know everything. Like, you should question that and run.
Absolutely. And so specifically what I'm here to do is just to empower other women, not in a feminism way. I actually hate modern day feminism. I don't hate it. I just think it's misplaced. It's misguided. So what I want to do is empower women to actually listen to themselves, and then also listen to their husbands, not because our husbands know everything all the time, but we should also give our own opinions to our husbands so that we can eventually come to, like, an understanding. And that's something that me and my fiance are actually learning a lot more about together, because it's like, I was asking him the other day, I'm like, what are you basing our relationship on? Like, when we decide to make decisions, especially when we're married, like, what are we actually basing it on? It's like, well, I don't really know. I was like, well, I mean, we both agree we don't want to base it on other people, not because we don't think they have the best intentions, but what are they basing it on? And then it's through a filtered and biased, thoughts and feelings. And also, if you're telling someone about a problem we're having, it's only your side, which isn't bad. But then if whoever you're telling it to is probably also biased for you, so whatever you're coming out with,
Yeah.
not that
Yeah.
it's necessarily not based or that we can't go to people for advice, but now take that to the Bible and hit the Bible and be like, how should I handle this situation? How should I talk to my wife? How should I talk to my husband? Because we don't all have it figured out, but God gave us a guide for life, because every problem basically is in that book: how to deal with sickness, how to treat other people, that we should be modest. Like, I don't know everything. I'm never going to know everything. I've always believed that everyone has something interesting to say. It literally does not matter who you are. And that's your purpose. Your purpose is to help people see the difference that they make in the world. And they need more of that.
That is my purpose specifically, is like, because there's so many people walking around. And I met with a young man today and did a 2-hour coaching session, and like I'm telling you what, he's in the top 1% of, like, and he's 23,
Yeah.
and he before the session he sent me like a breakdown of all of his stuff, and he like has all of he understands his close rate. He understands, like, he has everything broken down. He understands if he can get people locked into a 5-day free trial, that he closes 100% of those people. Like, 100% of those people move forward with them.
That's awesome.
And so a lot of people, like, I work with people that have been in the business for years and they don't understand that one thing. If they get that one thing, how will they close their clients?
Yeah.
But then, because he's doing it alone, because he's like in his head, because like you're just grinding, picking up the phone, making cold calls, doing the things, we all have that imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't see the magic that I see, like, that I'm like, no, dude, you're top 1%. Like, let's do this. Like, there's some gaps here. Like, why aren't you doing this? And he's like, I don't know, but like, and it's because he's holding himself back, because he's like in his head about it, And it's just, it's cool to uncage that, because now what kind of
Yes.
difference is he going to make in the world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've got that feeling from you. So when I first started the podcast with my dad, even, I've always kind of had these thoughts, but then again, you get in your head, and I've been fighting, like, really what God has called me to do. Not necessarily so blanket, black and white, that I've just been fighting it all, but it's not easy to come on a podcast and have everything that you say exposed to the whole world. But
5,000%. Yeah.
but if you actually don't care about what the world says,
Yep.
like, the thought that of how freeing it is to not care about what other people say or think, I cry for the people who don't have that feeling. And that's the difference. That's literally the difference between when we started and now. And I've always not really cared, but then you still listen to the people really close to you, and they're coming from a good place.
Absolutely.
So understanding where they're coming from, that's something I think I've always had the ability to do, is no matter who or what their opinions are, if I ask them enough questions, I can see exactly how they got there. And I can actually kind of talk through, however willing they are to change their mind, however open they are to hearing other sides, at least be like, did you consider this? And if you did, great. Now, this is what I got from it. And just having those conversations, everyone ends in a place for a reason. And it doesn't mean that their reason is based on good things, but they got there somehow, some way. And by just being angry about the way people are, about their thoughts and their feelings, actually doesn't do anything. My dad's cousin said, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. And it's true. Nobody wants to be around someone who makes you feel like shit. And I've definitely been like, there's times in my life where when I saw something I didn't like with someone around me, I didn't treat them with kindness.
Mm-hmm.
I just got mad. I'm like, why don't you understand? And that was because I just wasn't really thinking about it from a compassionate standpoint. And I will make mistakes in the future. But then as long as we're trying to be a part of the solution and not furthering part, being part of the problem, like that's really what it's about. Again, it's not being perfect. God never called us to be perfect. He called us to do the best that we can with the circumstances we're given. But we have more control over our circumstances than anyone will tell you. Doesn't matter who you are. It's really easy to blame. Like the way I was is just because of the people around me. Okay, well, why would they treat me any differently than how I'm treating them? And then that just
Exactly.
makes like a toxic environment.
Well, and then you like how, applying this to the Bible and how you say like, you can turn to the Bible and see how to like live life, and you're going through this and like just like Jesus's life, and you look
Mm-hmm.
at like example of the lady that that they were going to stone, like
Yeah.
I don't know, I can't remember where it's at, but they were going to stone her because she was like a whore,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus came upon the group and said, whoever is not free of sin cast the first stone,
Yeah.
and everybody sat there, nobody threw the stone, right? So he's merciful, he's forgiving, right? He's forgiving, he wants to see the other side. But then he didn't just let her off. He walked up to her and said, "Stop sinning.
Yeah.
Don't do that."
Yeah.
Like he didn't say like, "All right, go be on your merry way. I don't want to offend you. Live life how you want to live it. You're
Yeah.
fat and you're gonna, like you're obese and you can't breathe, and like you're like, go ahead and live life because I don't want to tell you that that's unhealthy. Like
Mm-hmm.
like love your body. Well, your body is not going to last. Your life is not going to last. So like, you know what? It might be uncomfortable to hear that you should, take care of your body better to live a better life, but the truth will set you free. It'll piss you off.
It's
It'll
okay
make you
to feel that way.
mad,
Like,
but sometimes you got to hear it. And if you
yeah.
truly love somebody, you got to tell them.
Also lead by example.
And lead by example. Lead
Mm-hmm.
by example. I had this so when I first started my business, there was this. I was part of this like mastermind group of different entrepreneurs. Like my coach that I hired invited me to this group that he was running, and there was this guy in the group, and he did websites. Like he's still around. He still does websites. He's doing pretty well now, but he'd been doing it for 20 years, and like he was broken, like completely broken. Like he was sitting in this group, and he was like, if you've ever been in a mastermind, there's like you to take a section a turn each week. Each person's in a hot seat, and so they give you the download of their business and what their challenges are and what they need to, and then the rest of the group will go to work and tell you like, this is what I see and how you can like take it to the next level, or how you can solve this problem. And so he's going on and on about how he had this business for 20 years and he used to be super successful and he had all these big clients, but over time the clients kind of like left him, or like, just doesn't really sure why, just things kind of dropped off, and he hasn't been making calls and he hasn't been out doing any kind of outreach, and he doesn't really sure if he loves the business anymore, and he's just really down. And everybody was like being so kind, everybody in the group was being so nice, like, oh John, maybe you should like get on Facebook and make some posts and like, like the cushy stuff, like go
Yeah.
and do something that's not gonna like hurt your feelings and not gonna hurt anybody else's feelings, and it's not gonna get any fucking results either. Like it's not gonna get the results.
No.
And if it was just John, like if it wasn't for the rest of the people that's in my supposed mastermind that's supposed to help us go to another level, like coddling and being kind, I probably wouldn't have went off. But like it was pissing me off that nobody is going to shine a mirror in this guy and really help him. Like
Yeah.
really help him. What are we even here wasting our time for if nobody's going to truly help you? And so I'm like, dude, like this is like everybody's telling you the nice easy thing. I'm like just the fact of the matter is you have to stop being a pussy. Like you have to pick up the fucking phone. You have to pick up the phone. You got to call your people. You used to have all these clients. Like you got to call them up and say, "Hey, I was just thinking about you. Like it's been a while. What's going on?" Like pick up the phone. But you got to do that. Like like everybody else is trying to tiptoe around you. But like you, at the end of the day, you got a question of whether
Yeah.
like you even want to do this. And if you don't want to do this, nothing I'm going to say is going to make a difference. If you want to do this, then you gotta stop being a pussy.
Yeah.
And I like instantly, this guy's look on his face looked like I broke him. Like I felt so bad. I felt so horrible. I left the meeting and like I was thinking like I got to call John and apologize. Like I like really upset him, really broke him. I went home. I told my wife. My wife almost made me sleep on the couch. Like she was like, "I can't believe you said that." And that was before she met John. John's the
Yeah.
nicest guy. He's like just this amazing guy. So she was like, I can't believe you said that to him. I'm like, yeah, I should probably call him and apologize. Well, I got busy and I never called and apologized. So next week we're at the mastermind and I walk in and like the thing with the mastermind is every week you start the meeting and you have to give a recap of what happened, like what you did
Yeah.
with like what the advice everybody gave you or what your strategy was. And I walk in, I sit down and I like make eye contact with him and he starts off and he says, I left here and I was so pissed. He was like, I was driving home and I'm like, who the fuck does this guy think he is? Like, why did he talk to me like that? Like, he was like, I was ranting and I was working my way up and I was so mad at Jason. He was like, and then I went home to my wife. And he was like, and I was ranting and I was telling my wife about, can you believe he told that? He said that to me? He was like, and then I looked at my wife and she couldn't make eye contact with me. And I realized that for the first time, somebody had told me the truth that even my wife couldn't tell me that I
Wow.
needed to grow up and be a man, that I needed to take care of it, that I needed to stop bitching about it and just do something about it. He was like, and as soon as I realized my wife couldn't make eye contact with me and she knew what Jason said to me out loud, I realized that Jason was right. And so I picked up the phone and I started making calls and I started calling my past clients. And this week I've sold 5 clients. And he was like, this is the best week I've had in the last 5 years.
Oh my
He was like, it's absolutely
gosh.
amazing. I've changed my business. And that guy ended up becoming a coaching client of mine.
That is incredible. That's incredible. That's just a testament to like if you tell the truth to somebody and it might not always seem nice, but I would much rather tell you the truth than lie to you because it's so much meaner. It's so much meaner.
Yeah, that's what I talk about. Is like we get this like, what is kind? We want to be kind
Yeah.
to people. Jesus says, "Be kind to people," and like I love how like talking about that and segueing that into from the Bible of like, yeah, be kind. Like, don't stone people or kill them, but tell
Yeah.
them the truth too. Because like if I'm sitting here and you've got something between your teeth, like, and I'm not gonna tell you because I don't want to offend you. You know, like I'm gonna make Melissa mad or make her upset or make
Right?
her feel self conscious. I'm not being kind to you. I'm being kind to myself.
Yeah.
I'm not going to step into the fire and do something that might like make you feel a little bit uncomfortable to make sure that you're not uncomfortable the rest of the day.
Right.
Because the fact of the matter is, when you leave the conversation, you're going to go leave, and how many conversations are you going to have before you notice it? And then when you notice it, you're going to be like,
Wow, all those people let me go throughout my day and they were staring
I
at
said
the
that at
thing and,
Jason for an
like-
hour eating lunch, and you didn't tell me before I
Yeah,
left.
no, I honestly, and some people like actually don't actually want to hear that, but okay, fine. Then like
That's your
just
problem.
be
Then go be an
mad.
idiot. Like, go look like an
Yeah.
idiot with that
Yeah.
thing in between your teeth.
Yeah,
You know,
I've
like
actually,
I can't help
I've
you.
literally
Then.
had conversations with people where they're upset that I tell them that, and I'm like, okay, well then, just please tell me if there's ever something in my teeth, and I will never tell you again. I'll fine. Like,
Just do me a favor and help me out. I'll never
Yeah.
help you out again. But
yeah. But at the same time, if someone's like upset at me for saying that, it's probably because they don't have the balls to say it to somebody else. And so really they're mad at themselves. So that's something
Yeah.
else I've come to realize is that when people aren't kind to another person, it has way more and I always kind of talked about this, like the way someone treats you says way more about them than it does you. But how often does someone come up to you and just dump everything that's happening in a mean way where there's no justification for it? And then we're like, wow, I just must be a piece of shit. It's why they did that to me. And actually, no.
it's because of what's going on between them.
Yeah.
And this is like when you're a kid, like this doesn't really make you feel better. But my mom, when I'd get bullied in school, like like these kids would pick on me through elementary school, and I'd come up and my mom would be like, "Oh, it's because they feel so much worse on the inside, or you don't know
Yeah.
what's going on in their life." And I'm like, I don't really care what's going on in their life. It doesn't make me feel like it was hard to believe as a little kid that these guys that seemed so strong to me that would kick my
Yeah.
ass had like internal battles going on.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got older and I ran into this kid that was like my biggest bully that that was like this big intimidating kid. And I ran into him and he walked up to me and he was like, he said, "I want to apologize." He was like, "I didn't realize it then, but I was going through so much." He was like, "My dad was abusing me, and there's like all this stuff going on, and like the way that I was outputting it to the world was like I was like, wow, my mom was right all those years." And it doesn't,
Yeah.
it made me feel so much better from the sense of like, again, it's like that forgiveness. And once you forgive somebody, whether they apologize or not, like it lets your heart live.
Freeing.
Yeah.
So freeing. It's like a weight lifted off your shoulders. Absolutely. I mean, yeah. When I was in school, when I was like in grade school, I actually had the mindset, and I don't think this is right either. I know it wasn't right because it wasn't nice to myself, but I had this mindset that so I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, but I had a lot of friends outside of school. So all the people at school, I really didn't care much for what other people were interested in, like boys or chasing people around or pretending like I always kind of said things as it was. I don't like lying. I've never liked lying. I was never raised to lie. So like when someone would be like, "Oh, do I look cute?" I'd be like, "I don't really like think that suits you." And I'm like, and I never really got great feedback from that. Shocker. And that's just an example, but that showed up in many ways. However, whenever like there would be a new student, I would always just be really nice to them because like it's not easy being the new person anywhere. But very quickly, that person would then eventually move on to the popular kids, which I actually didn't even know this when I was in school. But there was a time where one of the more popular girls that I was actually friends with, this was like second or third grade, like really early on. And I went to Catholic school, so we had the same, the same class the whole time. But this girl, like, she came over to my house, and I hung out with her. Great, it was awesome. Then I went to her house, but unfortunately, like her parents were divorced, but her mom didn't have her license. And I went to her mom's house and their power went out. So she drove us through her subdivision to a park. And apparently she told my mom, and I went to school with my cousin in the same grade. So my aunt knew more about like the people because my mom wasn't really into that. Like talking, not that she didn't talk to the parents. She just like doesn't have time for gossip and stuff, so she never really knew about other people's lives unless it was told by her sister. But during this, like, she told my mom, "I hope it's okay. I brought them to the park." Mom was like, "Okay, like, why would it matter? Of course." And then later, she found out that it was because she didn't have a license because I think she was a drug addict or had too many DUIs. I actually don't know the whole circumstance at all. So when we were up north, that girl had called to make another play date, and my mom forgot to call her back. And my mom and I have talked about this, and we didn't even realize it until after 8th grade when like we graduated from our school and went our separate ways and had a talk, me and this girl. But my mom forgot to call her back, and she didn't really want me hanging out over there because she didn't know much about the situation. And she, like, I mean, who would want their daughter to go somewhere where you don't really know what's going on or the situation? And this girl had a lot of older siblings, much older siblings, brothers and sisters. And so my mom would never let me go somewhere where she didn't know exactly who was going to be around.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons but she forgot. And so that girl thought that I didn't want to hang out with her and didn't want to be her friend. And I had no idea. Again, like all these years, this girl just treated me like shit. And I never really
You had
understood.
no idea.
I was literally, I was bullied by this girl, but I never really saw it as bullying. But then I had the mindset that I must be unlovable, but also I don't want anyone else to go through what I'm going through. So I'll help anyone in my class. If they're going through a fight with the popular crew, I would sit with them because I always sat alone for the most part. Like I wasn't invited to their parties. So, and that was for years and years. And it would be on and off. Sometimes they would invite me and then they wouldn't invite my cousin. And my cousin, I love her to death, but we fought a lot because we're basically siblings. So we didn't seem the best. And also I was younger than all the girls. There's a lot of reasons and a lot of things that influence this whole situation. Again, over like 9 years. 9 years of being in the same grade as these girls every single day. It was torture for me. By the time middle school came around, I was like, I'd much rather they be mean to me than anybody else. So I will take all their shit because I know I can handle it. Because I did firmly believe that God will never give me more than I can handle. And then I'll just help people where I can. But then that made me a doormat. And then it made me intolerable to my family at times because like, no one should ever have to take that shit, but I didn't know how to set a boundary. And I also just understood that these people had a lot more going on. Fast forward 8th grade, we finally graduated and she didn't invite my cousin to something. And I said I wouldn't go if my cousin wasn't invited, and she wasn't. And then I was like, why are you so mean? Like, what did I do to you? What did I do to you to deserve this? And eventually she told me that. And I went home and I told my mom because, all these years I would update my mom and stuff. And she's like, oh, yeah, that happened. And I was like, what? It was a really interesting moment. Now, I think that the spiritual battles that we go under through our life, like my mom and I, it's not my mom's fault at all. She protected me in the best way she knew how.
Absolutely.
And I never held any resentment, but it was like, it actually just felt good to understand why, maybe, even if it wasn't the full truth. I was never mean to that girl. I never tried to. It doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. I'm sure at times I could have just said something that rubbed her the wrong way. I don't know. But also I didn't really care to fit in and be what they thought a popular girl was. I didn't, there were times that I would like wear the clothes they wore just to seem cool. And then I'm like, I actually hate this. I'm not comfortable at all. This isn't me. I'm lying to myself, and that's not fair either. So I didn't have a lot of friends, like in school particularly, but I had a lot of cousins, which is again why I love a big family, because I fought just as much with my cousins as I did anybody else, way more in fact. But I've gone through some big fights with them, and we always come back at the end of the day because we're family. And because actually, even if I was in the worst fight with you and you did the worst abominable thing that you could ever imagine to me, I will still be there to help you. And that's the kind of family we have. I do believe that
Cool.
most of my own family, not all, and it depends on where they're at in life. Like, you can't take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself. So again, it says way more about them if they can't help me in my time of need. But that's something that if I hadn't gone through that in my young years, that kind of put me into that depression. I wouldn't have worked my way out on my own,
5,000%.
and I wouldn't be able to relate to other people in those same situations. And
Absolutely.
again, I was more depressed understanding that I had a life of a lot of privilege. And why am I depressed? I know that other people have much worse lives. I knew that these people at my school had, a lot of problems with their families, and we all do, right? Like, my family isn't perfect either, but I have two parents still in the house, which is much more that can be said
Big
than
difference.
most of the kids that were around me.
Yep.
I was healthier than a lot of the kids, maybe not on the surface, or like, like when you actually look at the chronic problems, I have no idea how to even compare that. It doesn't matter. But again, like growing up, I was always compared to the other people around me, and I actually didn't care to have that. But I was able to kind of let those friend relationships go at school because I did have a good family, because I was fulfilled in other ways. And I had to go through it. And I even told my mom at various times, like, I don't think I can live like through school right now. I don't think I can do this. And she's like, and whether right or wrong, she's like, well, you kind of just have to, like, there's not really much else we can do. And that was my cry for help. But my mom had like 9 kids through all of our childhood.
Yeah.
I'm one of 3, but I have lots of cousins, and all of their parents
around.
work. So she didn't have just 3 kids. She had everyone else's kids too. And she was taking care of my grandparents. But again, my mom was like worked from home. So she did work a full-time job. She did all these things. It wasn't really like she shouldn't have protected me the way that I felt like I needed it in the moment, because God will never give you more than you can handle. And if you can believe that, you will come out on the other side, and it's not always going to be easy.
Well, and that's nailing the difference maker piece. The God not giving you more than you can handle. I believe that you get those things in order to then go back and help other people. Like, if you've been through it, then it's really, and it says it in the Bible, like, then shine your light, show other people the way, help other people. It's like how you go back and you give service. If you've learned something, go back and share it, and like create those platforms to where you can empower other people that are going through the same journey that you went through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it can be really hard when you go through crappy situations, not to fault everyone. And I never, even at the end, like, I never faulted that girl. And I really hope she's doing well, because I would never want someone to take me at my worst moment and then wish harm on me. Like, I would never want to be treated like that myself. But that was something that I lived for 9 years of my life. But again, like, because of my mom, for better or for worse, I am on the other side. My mom did protect me in all the important ways, and she also allowed me to go through things. Sometimes mothers actually shield their children too much, and then they create kids who actually can't handle the world. That did not happen to me, but it also
500%.
didn't mean that my mom isn't there anytime I needed her, and that my dad wasn't there anytime I needed him. And that if any of my family members, if she was like too, busy at a moment, that any of the other ones wouldn't help, even if they didn't really understand what I was going through. And even if it was, you know what, that's kind of your problem. Okay, that was helpful. Now I'm going to go figure out why it's my problem and what I need to do about it.
Yep.
Because we actually have the tools that we need to. And then there's so many books out there. I watched a lot of podcasts. I struggled talking to people about things that make me feel vulnerable, because I felt like it was always used against me. Like, I would tell this girl, like, oh yeah, this person was mean to me. Oh, but don't say anything. Oh, and then they would go tell the next person.
Yeah.
So I just never really relied a lot on other people, but I journaled. So a lot of my darkest times is written down somewhere. Like, and that was my way of getting it out. While also I felt like I was a burden. I felt like at my worst that by telling somebody else that I was going to burden them with something that I don't even know if they could handle. As a kid, I thought that. So instead, I put it on paper, and that immediately made me feel so much better. And then I could come back when I was more logical and understand what really went on and be like, wow, I was retarded. Like, those emotions were like actually the dumbest thing ever. In that circumstance, like I never used a whole lot of names. It was just like this happened, and I don't think it's their fault. So there might be some names I haven't even looked at them, but it's just more of like putting down the feelings, because how do you work through feelings that you don't understand? You put them
Mm,
down, get rid of them, get it off your shoulders, and come back more logically and read through them and be like, wow, that's what I was feeling. And then the next time you're feeling that, you understand what you need to do to kind of get yourself out of that hole. And other people might just kind of feed into it. My mom didn't, but other
other people
mothers
would.
would.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you feel this way, like, oh, okay, yeah, you're probably right. So let me just like make your life comfortable so that you can feel better. And really you're not helping them, because again, it's a
Stop.
band-aid on over the root cause. And the root cause is we're all seeking Jesus, and we all want to, like, we shouldn't value the things of this world. We shouldn't rely on what other people say to us, in the sense of like someone comes up to me and is really, really rude to me. I shouldn't live and die that. We should not. Like, and if we are, you're allowing yourself to be a victim of the people around you, which you can't control.
100%.
We can control ourselves.
Yep. I feel sad. I feel so sad for in thinking about people kids that commit suicide at an early age, and
Yeah.
like my great grandparents are buried up in the cemetery in St. Helen over by West Branch up north. In like from a young age, like going and visiting the cemetery every like summer, whenever we'd go up there a couple times a year, and right by them is a young girl that committed suicide at 16, and she's got this. It stands out to me. She's got this big
Mm-hmm.
marker, and there's like pictures of her, and she's got her poems and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and you could see that she was like going through this like internal struggle by the poems that she's written and stuff like that. And I always think about her in the sense of because like of my own growth in thinking about all the times where it's like going through the depression, like going through being bullied, not like understanding our feelings and stuff like that. Um, you know, I had this major revelation when I was in my early 20s of sitting there and like a compiling of being a victim and blaming all my circumstances on everything else and everybody
Mm-hmm.
that's and things that have happened to me, blaming my dad and all the things that he'd ever done to me from an abusive standpoint. And like, this is why I am the way I am. And this is why I'll never have anything. And like, one day I had this epiphany of like, he committed suicide at 42
Oh my gosh.
and I'm 45, 46 right now. So it's like one of those things. Like I've outlived my dad. But at that time, I was like probably like 22, 23, and sitting there and like this woe is me. And then sitting and thinking about like, wow, like he had this life that like he was abused and he went through all this stuff and he didn't think that there was a way that was different. And so
Yeah.
that's the way he raised us. He just, he's the victim. Like he had this mindset and I feel bad for him. I feel really bad for him because then he didn't have a relationship with either me or my brother.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, man, if I was him, like I'd sit back and be like, wow, look at my kids, like that's amazing. Like look what they came out of the shit. They came out of nothing and were able to create successful lives for themselves. Like I look at like being able to have the freedom and have my family and have like know that me and my wife are going to be together forever, and
Yeah.
know that we have raised our kid through a household with two parents and seeing the difference in that, seeing the difference in the way he reacts and behaves and like lives life and is empowered by that versus like other kids that are coddled or or that are going through a split family home. And I've been there.
Yeah.
And then ultimately he ended up like realizing, thinking that he had nothing and ended his life. Like that's sad. Like I'm not the victim. I've got the ability right now to change the family fortunes. I can create my own life. I can find my find my person. I can raise a family. I can,
Yeah.
I can instill those values or instill new values. And like it's just it's cool when you can sit back and stop blaming all your shit on other people.
Yeah.
Stop blaming whether it was really bad shit or somebody said something that you didn't make you feel good. They might have said you were fat or ugly or whatever, and it stuck with you for a long time. Who cares? Who cares? Like ultimately, because then
Yeah.
you run into those people again and they apologize, or maybe even if they don't, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. They're the ones who are gonna have to carry like they didn't treat someone right. And I certainly have my fair share of people I didn't treat right all the time, but it doesn't mean that that's all of that person, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think that's so sad. I struggle. Like there's a lot of bad things, in this world, and then so people just use that to justify why, like, we can justify anything in our heads.
Absolutely,
So
we can. Yeah, and a lot of people do.
yeah, and you literally anything can be justified. And so something that I like to that I kind of fall back on is choose your hard. It's not easy to be a victim, but it's also not easy to be the maker of your circumstances.
Yep.
So you have to kind of make that decision on your own. Is the fruits of that choice long term better or worse for you? And then just make a decision and know that every time you don't make a decision, you're allowing your subconscious mind, which may or may not be the best thing to follow because it's downstreaming your thoughts that you've had in the past that you have to rewire. Like every time you don't make a decision, you're just kind of you're choosing the easy route. You're choosing the easy route. And so you wonder why people kind of fall into the same circles of they're in an abusive relationship, then they leave, and then they end up right back into one. Well, because did you actually change anything about
You didn't change anything.
your mindset or what you're looking for in a person or what you think you deserve?
Yeah.
Like you have to choose to rewire that. And it's really hard being in an abusive relationship. It's also really hard rewiring your brain and focusing on things that eventually will lead you to the person who's not going to beat you up for existing on this world. Like,
because our thoughts create our results.
Yeah.
Like in my boot camps or my one-on-one coaching, I'll talk about beliefs, mindset, like those, that's the core. Like I'll look at like, as far as business development, the biggest things that hold us back are three things. And I've broke this down from the beginning. These are my foundations of my coaching or my boot camps. It's belief system, communication, like the way you communicate, and like who are your people falls in that. Like who are you serving? In what's their challenges, what's their problems, like not everything about you, but what's going on that outside. And that breaks into that communication. And then process, because if you're all over the board, you're not going to create a success. You're not going to create consistency. You're going to be all over the board. You're going to be throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and hoping that something sticks, or like hoping that you can stumble onto it. But if you do those, if you can master those three things. Now, the funny thing is whenever I say belief system, there are people that like puff out their chest and they feel like they've got the best belief system. Why are you here then?
Yeah.
Like, let's be humble, understand that we don't have it all figured out, and that our thought process right now is what's creating the results that we're in. And so I've before I started my business, there'd be people in my industry that complain about the results, and they'd like sit and talk about like, oh, this sucks, and like I'm not making any money, I can't find employees or whatever. And then I'd ask them a couple of questions, and I'd find the root of their problem, and I'd say, this is how we solve that problem. And they'd be like, yeah, but I like doing things the way that I like doing them. I'm like, well, then go fucking keep complaining then, because it's never going to change. It's never going to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the mindset.
Everything is. I don't think, so that's again, like kind of what I want to do with the podcast is just let people know that you are the creator of your environment. Like remind you, you're being lied to every single day. And every time that you just allow yourself to consume whatever it is that you're consuming, because it's easier, like pay attention to the path that's actually going to lead you down. There's a reason why people say like, oh, rap, it's like the start of the fall of these young kids, because the words are so fast. And like, okay, what do the words really say? Now there's great rap out there too. There's a couple of Christian rap bands that I listen to, but then I actually look at the words. I pay attention to all the words that I'm consuming. And I also come with the mindset that nobody actually knows everything about everything. So you have to assume that what are their opinions based on? Probably not always truth. And it doesn't mean they're not trying to seek truth, but we're also being lied to on a daily basis. So the best people with the best intentions might not be based in the truth that we're trying to seek and what is, like the Bible. So if you're ever not sure, like AI is an amazing tool. Use it. Like be like, hey, where in the Bible does it say something about this? And don't just read the insert. Go back and actually read the whole passage and learn about the context and hear other people's interpretations. It's really hard. I've always struggled reading the Bible because it's not an easy read. But there are parts that are easier.
Yeah.
And anywhere that you start, anything that you do every single day is better. That's better than yesterday is a win. And so it's not a fail if you don't give your life to the Lord. But what is a fail is not allowing yourself to understand that you have a choice and that anything you do today is more than yesterday. And that is all that God is asking you to do, is to be better than yesterday. Give it your all. Give it your best.
And so this is like just a little tip is like for people if you're getting into the Bible or like really trying to understand it, and just like using AI. AI is like fun. It's not the answer to everything, but like as I'm reading and going through and I'm like having these discoveries or like different things that like intrigue me, I go to my ChatGPT and I have my own like Bible study group with my ChatGPT and I'll like go back and forth and I'll like point out things and like it's been really cool, but it helps break down and understand some things a
Yeah.
little bit differently.
Yeah. There's a lot of technology and a lot of things out there that people are really worried about. And so an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So if you're not constantly filling your day and your mind with things that are good, doesn't mean you don't rest, but if you're just not constantly seeking more information, like the devil's going to do his work, whether you want him to or not, whether you're choosing to let him or not. And then the other thing is, shoot, I forgot where I was going with that. But yeah, so like, never mind.
Happens. No, you're good.
But yeah, basically, like just read the Bible, like just seek out the truth. And what I use AI a lot for is specifically like if I'm curious about a subject, I give it like the basis of like what I'm trying to figure out, and then I have it points me to books that I could read, and then I have it kind of synopsize it, and then I also research the people who are actually writing the books. Now, I don't have to only read from people who believe in God, but people who are seeking truth. Like I want to hear how they're relating life to this certain thing. But I've always struggled with self-help books. I love them, but I've struggled with them because I'm like, what is this based on? It's based on, I don't know, the fact that they're a victim and this is how like they get through life. Okay, that's valid because it's their life, but it's not based. And when I say based, I mean based in the truth of God.
Yeah.
So being able to read something and understand like, yeah, that just doesn't sit right with me, and being okay that you might not have exactly the reasons why. So if someone asks you like, well, why didn't you like that? That's something that specifically a lot of college educated people will do. They'll be like, well, why don't you like it? Oh, you can't formulate a good opinion. Well, my professor told me, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that that's right. It doesn't mean that you're smarter than me. And it should never be a me versus you situation anyway. It's a spiritual battle that we're both under and that we both should be working together towards solving. And it's all in the Bible.
Well, and like going back to college, it's like one of those things like you can get the same education really if you think about it on your own, like really plugging in and like getting into the book. So the information is out there. And I love there's a Charlie Kirk clip where this kid is like asking him why he is preaching to people not to do college and like how he's getting so much out of it. And he was like he's going for an economic degree, and he's like, great, have you read this and this, like these like major economic economists that are like the people that you need to read? And he's like, no. He's like, oh, how about this guy? And I don't even know their names, but he's like, the kid was like, oh yeah, we're getting into him. He's like, so out of the 5 major economists, you're only reading one. And you're telling me that your degree that you're saying is worth it. It's just really cool as you dissect some of that stuff that like really, what is that college education going for? You can get so much more just through the experience. Now, if you weren't going to be a doctor, you've got to go through like the college. If you're going to be a lawyer, there's certain things you have to do. But like, there's so many ways to go out and be successful without going through that system.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot to be said for the information we can find on our own. However, it is very easy, right? You're told all the time, like as a Catholic school student, I was told all the time that everything they were doing was preparing me for college. By the way, college was way easier than Catholic school, but I also went to a community school. But really, like, okay, I'm told that, and then the only way that I can be successful in a career is if I go the college route. That never made sense to me. It never made sense to me because I'm learning from people who may or may not have ever even worked in the field I'm in.
Absolutely.
And when you actually look at the courses that they're providing to you to be a certain thing, like, okay, why is gender studies in there? And I haven't looked at a lot of them. There's not every college is like that, but there's a lot of BS that, okay, like, I guess you could learn about it. And then for me, what I've always had, what has always been the struggle for me when learning any information is if I can't apply it to real life, it's a waste of my time. Not that it's not that it's a waste of my time to learn it at all, but if I can't apply it, which in school, how do you apply anything that you're learning? You're just told to memorize the facts and take a test.
Absolutely.
That never made sense to me. I was like, okay, it really is a waste of my time. I could spend the 7 hours instead learning about one specific topic and then applying it, and I will never forget it again in my life, ever.
5,000%. So I want to get into this, and I know your podcast coming up soon, so we won't extend it too far. But I love like in the platform of you see that like men and women were created different. They
Yeah.
have different roles, but at the same time, like you're not just the like stay at home wife. Like you have a successful career
Yeah.
yourself, and you're doing things that are getting your voice out there, like having your podcast and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about that.
There's a lot to this. So I've always watched my mom work, but she still stayed at home and she was around for all the important things. And same with my dad. They both worked from home, but they had very successful businesses. We would travel a lot, but I wasn't homeschooled. So what I want to do and the mindset I've always had is that I do want to homeschool my kids. So I found myself in a career where I can have more flexibility, but if I had a kid tomorrow, my career will take a pause because I can always pick it up later down the road. It might be hard, it might be a lot more work, but we all of us women have biological clocks inside of our wombs, you know, so we have only so many eggs and those kind of disappear later in life, and it doesn't mean that we have to have kids super early. It doesn't mean that at all. But what it does mean is like my career isn't first. What my career does it is affords me freedom and flexibility while still feeling fulfilled. So I don't think that we shouldn't have careers and we should just stay at home and be a traditional wife. But you're seeing a lot of these young women who have been told lies their whole lives seeking the traditional housewife type role. And then also a lot of them end up doing podcasts. They end up doing things like this because it gives them a lot of freedom while also being fulfilled, while having conversations and connecting. And then I've pretty much I've totally disregarded the 9 to 5 work schedule I have a lot of people who work with me and for me, and they're all women, and it's not because I don't like men working for me at all, but they're just deeply passionate about what they do and they're really good at it. And I always tell them like, hey, if your family, just so you know, I will not do a meeting if it means that because someone's really sick in my house. It doesn't mean I don't do it ever. It just means like, this kind of takes precedent first, especially in the field I'm in. Some people don't prioritize what it is that I'm like the advice I'm providing. So, but again, if my family and I'm not okay, I can't help those people efficiently. And I feel the same way about my assistants. So if ever they needed time, like one of my assistants does her work with a baby on her lap, but she doesn't do anything client contact, and we'll meet. Sometimes she's like, hey, I got to put the baby down, or hey, she's sick today. Can we like adjust this? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I want that same grace for myself and for my family, especially when I'm in those roles. But having I've set up a team specifically in like my main job where I don't work a 9 to 5, but it doesn't mean that I don't work 7 a.m. sometimes to 7 p.m. or that I don't work a Saturday or a Sunday.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that I don't do 40 hours of work in a week. If anything, I probably do a lot more, but I also do it more efficiently because I have a team set up. And I firmly believe that my career can take a pause, but having kids, if that's what I'm supposed to do, should never have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
That should never be something that I put off just because. Like it's pointless, and everyone waits for the perfect time to have kids, and there's never going to be a perfect time for that.
Nope.
You will never be fully prepared to accept a brand new human being into this world.
5,000%.
No matter how much money you have,
Yep.
no matter how many people are around you, no matter who can help you with that kid, you kind of just do what you got to do, like that, and that's it.
You'll learn as you become a parent that like I don't know if you've assumed this or not, but I always assumed my mom just got a manual, when she started having kids, and like you just learn how to do it, and like I don't know, as a kid you just have faith, I guess, that your parents know what they're doing, because they're controlling the wheel, right?
They tell you I know everything, right? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but
you realize they don't, and then I look back at my mom and be like, wow, how'd you do it? How'd you make it through all of that? And then I look at like my sister, my brother, and me, and we all have these successful relationships. Like, like we're in relationships where we're going to be with our person for the rest of our life. And we all own, well, me and my brother own businesses. My sister's successful at the stuff that she does. It's like my mom was a rock that like held it through. How'd she do it? I don't know, because we don't have manuals. Like, It's like you figuring it out. I'm 46 and my son's a senior this year. And I'm like, how would I make it? Like what happened? But he's a good kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so important. And that's something that we all realize as we get older, is that our parents were parenting for the first time ever. And so kids, like, they have an amazing amount of grace. Like we all know children who come from the worst situations with their parents. And if their parents came and actually honestly apologized for everything they went through and changed, that kid would accept that parent, because we all crave them. And you see it happen multiple times where a parent will come back and apologize and use that kind of like almost as a weapon, whether they realize it or not. And it's really doing more harm for the kid. But every time that kid
100%.
is like, yeah, and until eventually they say no, which is more into your adulthood. But all of us kids crave our parents, and that makes kids really forgiving. You don't have to get it all right the first time. Again, that's not what God called us to do. But if you're not having these conversations with your kid where it makes sense, then why would they have any faith in what you're doing? And again, it doesn't mean you have to be perfect or that you have to have these conversations all the time. There were a lot of times in life where my parents would just tell me because I said so. I hated it.
Yep.
I hated it, but I did believe at the end of the day they had my best interests. And as an adult, while they're not trying to make sure I'm not dying because of some retarded thing that me and my boy cousins and brothers are doing out in the woods, we actually have the time to talk through them and be like, oh, well, this is how I felt. And my mom's like, what? And actually, it's really fun realizing as adults, like how we all remember situations differently. Like my brother will just have a horrible thought around something that we all enjoyed a lot because of his perspective. Like perception is reality for every individual. So when we come up and we're like, hey, this happened and it made me feel this way, and then they say you're wrong, it's like, well, it's how I perceived it. So tell me how I'm wrong and how you perceived it. And that's conversation, but that's pretty much not always valued by every person. And it's also not easy, and you're going to step on toes.
Well, we live in a world where everybody's trying to like protect their, like not get bruised and not get hurt. And it's an accumulation of like generations of people that are like, oh, I got my feelings hurt when this happened at school, or when my parents told me this. And so everybody's trying to walk on these eggshells. I think the best thing you can do as a parent or just as a society, period, is we got to let people experience. We got to let people experience loss and pain. And it's the hardest thing to do as a parent, to see your kids struggle, to see them go through a breakup, to see them go through a tragedy, and you just want to take it all away. But it's the worst thing you can do is to step in and make sure that they like take that pain away. To step in and make sure that they don't have to problem solve themselves. Because then you're setting up a kid that is not, you're not creating armies that way. You're creating people that they're lemmings, and they're not self-sufficient, and they're going to be relying on somebody all the time. You look at people that rely on the government, or they rely on their job, they rely on different things. Like, no, like I want to create, and again, self-sufficient, and like somebody that can go out and solve problems, and when he's in a pinch, he can figure it out and thrive out of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a great point.
But you don't get that by protecting them.
No, and we're all doing life the first time. So the moment that you're valuing your kids' health, or not health, like just like you're valuing your kid and what they're going through more than what you're going through, like you're still experiencing the world also for the first time ever, obviously with more years under your belt. But if you're not taking care of yourself first, and really like also your relationship with the person you're with, then you can't actually take care of your kids most effectively and efficiently. So, and people forget that, like, there are times where my mom didn't have the time, or my dad didn't have the time to take care of something that was going on in my life. And it wasn't because they didn't care, but there was much bigger things happening on a family level that I could never wrap my head around, that you really won't understand until you're an adult, or unless you're wise enough to kind of see that and let it go as a kid. But yeah, like in order, like actually protecting your kids the way that a lot of these helicopter moms do, it's just, again, it's creating kids that aren't going to be able to handle the real world, and you're not helping our world create armies. You're just not. It's more harmful than it is good on so many levels. And it's not something you see in every interaction. It's something you see over time. And that's something that I do think I have an ability to do, is see like, okay, I can visualize the trajectory of where this is going to end up. And so if I say something now, you can't say I didn't try. And it's all just about planting seeds. You're not going to change anyone's mind in one conversation, but you can give them things to think about. And that seed over time is going to bloom into a tree that, as long as they foster and they feed and they water, it will. But they just have to hear more good things. And you don't have to have a podcast like this to do it. You can just be the example in the people around you, and pay attention to how you're affecting the people around you, for better or for worse. Because you're not always going to get it right, but we can just try to do better every day.
in thinking about talking about impacting people's lives, I heard this story from there's this guy I follow. He's a pastor of a church. I can't think of what his name is off the top of my head, and I see him like in my stuff all the time recently. But he was telling this story of like several years ago, like 100 years ago. These two boys went to like this event, like this like church, this like church event or whatever. They like showed up. They walked into this building and they saw this guy like preaching, and I can't remember what the guy's name was. He was kind of famous at the time, and they were like listening to him, and then somebody like saw that they like snuck in and kicked him out, and they didn't have tickets, so they like kicked them out. And as they
Mm.
were leaving, one of the ushers saw that they were leaving and walked up to him and said, "Hey, like come in. I want you to witness this. I want you to see this, and like come in on me. I'll pay for it." And so this usher paid for these two boys
Wow.
to come in and watch it. One of the boys was Billy Graham, and I can't remember who the other guy was, but they were like went on to be major influencers in Christianity. And he was like, the whole point of it is the preacher was like this famous guy, and he was like, who was the hero in the story? It wasn't the
Hmm.
preacher, it wasn't the boys, it was that usher.
Yeah.
They saw two boys being turned away and said, "No, not on my watch.
Hmm.
You're going to come in and you're going to experience this because you want to see it." And like, you changed their world. You changed the world.
That's awesome.
How
I
much can
love
you make a
that.
little impact?
Yeah. Yeah. And you hear too about how people like come to you later in life and they're like, you said this one thing and it just really stuck with me. And you're like, okay, well, that actually, in the grand scheme of things, didn't really mean a lot to you, but you just never know what kind of impression you're leaving on people. And every time you do something nice, it's one thing that's balancing out the mean stuff. And again, nice and being kind isn't always just ignoring and accepting everyone exactly where they're at and who they are, but you should also meet people where they're at. So you're not going to change your mind by being so hard-headed and rude about what you have to say. Meet them where they are so that we can bring them with us really to the kingdom of God. Like, it's not for this world. Nothing is of this world. It shouldn't be. And anytime we're not choosing to recognize that, we're choosing the world.
That is a perfect mic drop moment, and perfect segue for you to move into your podcast. So
Yeah,
I'm super excited. I'm super excited
me
to
too.
watch your journey. I'm super excited to have you back on as we continue this climb and continue to have these conversations. So, Melissa, thank you for being on Coffee and
Yeah.
Grit.
Thanks for having me. This
My
is
absolute
awesome.
pleasure. My pleasure.